Hello, my name is Brandon Clayton, the Algebra Guy. Today, as you see on your screen, we will be talking about, it's always hard to say that, converting percents, fractions, and decimals. So we're going to go back and forth between decimal to a percent to a fraction to a percent, and go. And you really want to get good at that skill because you'll find it very useful as you move forward in your math journey. So let's get to it. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to do this type of problem: convert 5/7 to a percent. So it should be pretty simple after this. Questions. How can we better understand percent through this definition? We're going to look at what is the definition of percent. How do we convert percents to fractions and decimals, and how we convert decimals and fractions to percents. Let's start with the definition. What does percent actually mean? So percent, in order to answer that, let's look at what I have in here in yellow. A percent is a ratio whose denominator is 100. So what does that mean? So let's think about it this way. How many cents are in a dollar? So let's look at this word cents. How many cents are in a dollar? I hope you're saying 100. How many years are in a century? See, notice that same root word, cent. And I could go so far, I didn't put this here, but how many legs does a centipede have? Right, and you're probably catching on by this point because when you see that word cent, you're going to relate it back to what number? 100. So what does percent mean? Well, that literally means something per 100. So if I said I have 80%, that means I have 80 per 100. That means for every 100, there are 80 of those items. So you could write it 80% like that, or you could write it 80%. Notice this division sign, I'm saying per. Why? Because that's the same thing as if I said we're going 30 miles per every hour, right? So this is the same language. I just want you to understand we're just given some kind of ratio, some kind of relationship between two things, and asking ourselves, what is the relationship for every 100? So we can get an idea of what that thing looks like when compared to what's totally there. So let's do some problems to kind of get a better understand how we can manipulate this 100% or this percent, this idea of percent. According to the Public Policy Institution of California, 2010, 44% of the parents of public school children would like their youngest child to earn a degree. Write this percent as a ratio. All right, there's three ways to write a ratio. The one we're most interested in is a fraction. So 44% can be simply written as 44 per 100. That's 44%. Now we could have wrote a ratio as 44 to 100 like this, or just saying 44 to every 100. But the one, like I said, we're most interested in is the one as a fraction because we use that quite a bit as we move along in math. So there you go. All right, let's convert these percents to fractions and decimals. Convert each percent to a fraction. So what about this? How to convert this to a fraction? Well, if we remember what a percent is saying, we're simply saying this is 24.5% so for every 100. And that's it right there. 24.5 over 100. That is 24.5%. So you just write it literally as it says. 33 and a third percent is 33 and 1/3%. That's it. Convert each percent to a decimal. So let's go backwards now. So how do I write 6% as a decimal? So as a fraction, it'll look like this. Well, how does it look as a decimal? Well, if you remember, this bottom number is telling me it's in the hundredths place. And if you remember your decimals, let's say that this is a decimal, and we have the first place here is going to be our tenths place, whatever number is there. And then our next place will be our hundredths place. So I know there's a 600, so I'm going to write it 0.06. So there's a 6 in the hundredths place. So that's 600ths or 6% as a decimal. Same thing here is 78 per 100. So the decimal is going to be 0.78 because that's 78 hundredths. So it's that simple. All right, let's do these as well. And I would try to pause it here and work these before I work them to see if you're catching on. How would you do 135%? Well, just take 135 per cent. And there you go. It's that simple. If you wanted to make this, this says percent to a decimal. So we're going to make this in the hundreds place. So this is going to be 1.35. So that was kind of interesting, right? Because we already have, if we put this as a mixed number, we really are looking at 1 and 35 over 100. Because we have 100 already in this top portion, so that's one whole. Because we have 100 out of 100, so that's one whole. That's where we got this 1 from. Well, how much do we have left up here? We have 35 left, so we have 1 and 3500. So that's why we get this 1 and 35 hundredths. 35 hundredths. So this is the same thing as 135%. So let's try this one now. 12.5%. Notice I like to write as a fraction first, but before trying to convert it as a decimal, because it's a lot easier that way. And to get this one to be a decimal, we're going to divide this by 100. And that's really all we're doing, by the way. We're dividing this number by 100. And if I put in my calculator to show the same thing, well, when I divide this by 100, this is going to give me 0.125. Well, how can that be? Because that's like thousands. Well, because that decimal right here kind of changes things. And let me prove it to you. Let me actually pull up a calculator. And you'll notice a pattern. So if I put 12.5 and I divided it by 100, look what we get. Same thing we got here, right? But I want you to see if you can find the pattern. 85 divided by 100 is 0.85. 70 divided by 100 is 0.7. So what's really happening over and over again is when you divide by 100, and we've talked about this in previous lessons, that this decimal is moving 2 spaces to the left. That's why I got this 0.125. When I had 75 and divided by 100, well, the decimal is understood to be right here. So that really moved this decimal 2 spaces here, leaving it at 0.75. So that's really what I'm doing in my head. I'm just thinking, okay, this decimal is moving 2 spaces each time I divide by 100. Now, if you're dividing by 10, how many spaces would it move? Just 1. So by 100, 2 spaces. By 1,000, 3 spaces. And you could just put in the calculator to remind yourself of that, or just put in the calculator to get the answer. But that's just a real quick mental way to see what's really going on there. All right, let's write this number, 77%. Among a group of business leaders, 77% believe that poor math and science education in the U.S. will lead to higher unemployment rate. Okay, that's pretty important, right? We don't want poor math skills because we don't want high unemployment, especially for you. So convert the percent to a fraction. So convert this percent to a fraction. Easy peasy for sheezy. All right, what about a decimal? Where are we going to put this decimal? 77 hundredths, just like that. And again, if I would have just used a calculator, check my answer, divide by 100, you'll see that we're getting the same thing. Deck of cards. There are 4 suits of cards in a deck: heart, diamonds, clubs, and spades. What's the probability of randomly choosing a heart from the shuffled deck of cards? Well, there's a fourth of each one, so that's 25%. Well, we're just worried about transforming that to a fraction and then to a decimal. Because that decimal that's here, that's understood to be there, moves 2 spaces over, gives us 0.25. And again, you can check that on your calculator, but you should get the same thing. All right, let's convert these decimals to percent now. So a little bit different when we work backwards. But think about it. What place is this 5 in? Well, that 5 is in the hundredths place, so it's going to be 5 hundredths. What about this one? Well, this 3 ends in 100 place, so that's going to be 83 hundredths. And there you go. That's how you would do that. And what if you have a whole number in front? Or if the decimal goes further than those two spaces, how would it look? So if you have a whole number in front, you know we have one whole number, that one, and 5 hundredths. Now, if you wanted to change this to a mixed number, you can go ahead and do the math to do that. 1 times 100 plus 5 is 105 over 100. And you can divide that again and get right back to 1.05. So depending on how the question asks, either one of those will be right, whether it be mixed or improper fraction. What about this one? This one's in the thousands place right here. Well, all we need to do is move the decimal the opposite way. See, here we moved it to the right 2 spaces. They gave us 105. So we're going to move it 2 spaces. That's 7.5 over 100. So that's how you're going to do that one, is realize that this decimal, now we're going in the opposite direction, is going to be 7.5 over 100. Again, we can check our answer here by putting in the calculator. And put 7.5 divided by 100, and we should get 0.075, and we do. So there we go. Convert each fraction or mixed number to a percent. All right, so let's use our calculator for this one. 3/4 should be pretty easy to remember, but if you want to divide it by hand, you can go ahead and do 3 divided by 4. For time's sake, I'm going to use a calculator since we've already covered converting fractions to decimals. We've already done that. I'm just going to use a calculator to show that 3 divided by 4 is 0.75. We want a fraction, so the fraction would be, we want a percent. So this is 75 hundredths, which is the same thing as 75%. All right, so what about this next one? 11 divided by 8. So we can kind of see this already. There's a whole number you can take out of here because there's an 8 up there. One of the 8s would be taken out, leaving us only 3 out of 8 left. So we can just do we'll do both. We'll do 11 divided by 8. And there's what we're looking for here. So to get our percent, we're looking at where this decimal needs to be right here. So it's going to be 137.5. Is that percent? Let's see. Divided by 100. Yeah. 135. Because we're moving this decimal 2 spaces over to get right back to what we started with, which is 11/8. So let's check this answer to see if it's right. So we should, didn't mean to do that. We should be able to divide 137.5 and divide it by 100 and get the same answer as 11/8. So what's 137.5 divided by 100? So there it is, 1.375, which is the same thing that this decimal got us. This was 1.375. So to get this as a fraction, that's what it would be. But what is a percent? So this is literally the percent we're looking at. 137.5%. 137.5%. And for our last one, 2 1/5. So we know that's going to be 2. Let's write this as a. We'll just divide it as a decimal first. Actually, I'll leave those up there so you can see it. So let's divide 1 divided by 5. That's going to give us 0.2. So we know that this, if you wanted to write this out, this is the same thing as 2.2. Well, what is that as a percent? So what percent is that? Well, I know that there's 2, and you can put a 0 here to get this hundredths place. So that's a 20%. So if I move this 2 spaces to the right, 1, 2, that'll be 220%. And if I divide it, I would have to move it 2 spaces back to the left, 1, 2, to get back to my 2.2. And I'm going to show you in the calculator just to double check that you see that 220 divided by 100 is 2.2, which is the same thing as 2 1/5. You could have also converted this to a mixed number. 2 times 5 is 10, plus 1 is 11 over 5. And it's going to be the same thing. So we can do 11 divided by 5, and you still got 2.2. All right, what about 5/7 to a percent? Well, again, we're going to take out our trusty calculator and just divide it and look at what it says. So 5 divided by 7 is this not so pretty number here. 5 divided by 7. And let's round this off somewhere. So this, let's say this is approximately 0.71428. Let's round it up to 6. So let's say it's that number there. We wanted the percent. So when I look at the percent, I'm only concerned about to the hundredths place. So we look at this 1 here, and I look to the right and I see a 4. So I can say this is approximately 71%, because per 100 is really all I'm concerned about, this hundredths place. So this is approximately 71%. And that's really all you have to do. Now you can multiply by 100, 1, 2, and then move it over 1, 2 spaces at decimal. But you can also think about it as just looking at the hundredths place, because you're getting 71. If you just cut it off right there at the 71, you got 71 over 100. That's 71%. An article in a medical journal claimed that approximately 1/3 of American adults are obese. Convert this 1/3 to a percent. So if you try to convert 1/3 to a decimal, what kind of number are you going to get? If you remember, 1 divided by 3, you're going to get this repeating decimal. So when I write the fraction out, I need to make sure I notify that. I need to represent that by saying 33 and 1/3%, because right here it's 33%, but it's all this stuff here, it just keeps on going. So that's 33 and 1/3. Or if you want to do 33.33 with a little sign at the top that says it goes on, that would be acceptable too. But this is more ideal as a fraction. All right, did we answer our questions? How can we better understand percent through its definition? We understand that percent literally means per 100, for every 100. How do we convert percents to fractions and decimals? The way we do that is we convert percents to fractions. We take that percent. Let's say it was 33%. And we remember that this is per 100, so we just say 33 over 100. And remember that the hundredths place is looks like 0.33. So they're all connected. And we also went back. How do we convert decimals, 0.33, and fractions into percent? So we just worked backwards there to remember that. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. My name is Brandon Clayton, the Algebra Guy, and I will see you next lesson.